Fading or otherwise defunct media is something of a, I guess I would say, fascination of mine and of a lot of other people. It's really interesting to kind of see what happens when something is in its twilight or eventually gone and how people respond to it. Now, while it would be ideal for players to always be able to access these multiplayer components or always go back and watch an old movie or TV show, etc., there are times where things kind of fade away and they're not easily accessible anymore. That is what is happening with the Assassin's Creed multiplayers, and like we talked about a few weeks ago, there is an organized effort over on the subreddit for Assassin's Creed to say farewell to these games over a course of 6 different weekends. Now, I decided to participate in the weekend for Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. I plan to participate in the weekends for Revelations and, of course, Assassin's Creed 3's multiplayer as well, which, by the way, will be starting very soon here. I believe the day after today, the 5th and 6th of August that weekend, and the 12th and 13th of August is Revelations, with the following 2 weekends after that being Assassin's Creed 3. This was easiest to find matches on the PC, but people are celebrating it also on PS3 and Xbox 360. And whether it's a huge multiplayer that kind of goes away, like we see with some of the sports games every few years, or it's something a lot smaller and nicher like Assassin's Creed, it'll always be interesting to me to kind of look back on and experience this thing before it's gone. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood's multiplayer is very unique. It has a very, very interesting premise that is akin to violent hide and seek, and even has elements of something like Among Us, which would go on to be extremely popular, which we're going to talk about today. So if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content. I try and talk about Assassin's Creed just about every week. I believe I missed a week here because we had so much news to cover, but there will be a lot more Assassin's Creed videos coming, and of course more retrospectives before these multiplayers are fully gone because Ubisoft won't let us keep them for some reason, even though they have like amounts of money that are beyond comprehension. One thing that's very interesting about the Assassin's Creed Brotherhood multiplayer is just the core premise behind it. Now, there are many different modes, but I would say that the core mode that the most people played and still continued to play into the celebration was Wanted. The essential idea behind this is players are given different targets to go after and assassinate, but those targets are other players. But there's also a twist. Each player chooses a playable character out of the personas that they are able to choose from, whether it be a Harlequin, a Heliquin, a gladiator or a knight, or maybe even a mercenary. You know, the sky is the limit here. There are quite a few very unique and interesting characters that fit into the time period. While players do choose one of those to play, you would think that you go out there and you just look for that character, but the game's map actually auto-populates with that same character model times X amount. Like, there are a lot of other people walking around looking just like the target you're going after, and of course, while you're going after a target, somebody is usually going after you. You are someone else's target as well. So this kind of leads to a match of violent hide and seek, which is very interesting as you try and follow and stalk players, given a general direction with your compass, and figure out which one is the actual player and which one is the AI, which one is actually just an NPC. Now, there's not just 2 of them. Like I said, there can be whole crowds of the same character model walking around. You know, it might not be practical or like super believable that you'd have 50 Harlequins walking around together. It is something that's very interesting because it adds this element of thought and actual stealth behind the multiplayer that makes you think as you play. You're not only trying to make sure that the person coming after you doesn't know who you are, so you're trying to blend into the crowds, but also you want to make sure that your target doesn't know that you are an actual player, because of course, if you're acting in a suspicious manner, running, climbing buildings, jumping around, causing a ruckus, you know, just being a disturbance in the world, what's going to happen is that the target you're going after is probably going to notice that too. And because they're at a little bit of an advantage, likely hidden at this point, it makes it a lot easier for them to actually get away from you. So it actually makes you think and try and act like a normal NPC. You're trying to blend into the world, into other characters, and use the abilities at your disposal to do so. Now, one of the things I think is so fun about this is just some of the abilities. They are very, very creative, including disguise, which allows you to turn into a different character model on the map temporarily for a short amount of time and kind of blend in that way. So maybe you are supposed to be a doctor, the plague doctor essentially. Maybe that is who you're playing as, and somebody is coming after you. Well, yes, you can of course go hide in a hay barrel, although a lot of people are very good at this game to find you, or you can, of course, walk with other doctors, but if you take one wrong move, people will figure out who you are. You also could essentially walk with some other doctors or walk with another crowd and turn into a different character. This is also called luring or baiting the other enemy players into killing an NPC instead of you, in which case you get bonus points for that as well. If you can get the person going after you to kill another character on accident, to kill an NPC instead of you, you are going to get points and get ahead. And of course, the more stylish or the more stealthy you can make your kills against your targets, the more points you gain as well. You can get into open combat and just straight up chase after somebody, in which case you're only going to get 100 points or so for killing them. You can also try and do it the stealthy way, the right way, and get a kill from a much more stylish perspective, maybe getting anywhere from 400 to 700 or 800 points just for that one kill and moving you up the scoreboard. While the abilities are very, very fun and interesting, I love Disguise, like I said, this was very obviously Ubisoft's first attempt at an Assassin's Creed multiplayer in any kind of fleshed out manner that actually pitted players against each other, and because of that, there are certainly some problems, like for example, the smoke bomb. I never got very good at this thing because I didn't play every single day of these weekends. I just didn't have time while this was happening. I will for Revelations, but I digress. If you use the smoke bomb and get good with it, you essentially are unstoppable, because the way that this thing works is if you're being chased or followed, you drop this, the enemy player starts to cough, and you just stun them and they lose you as a target. Because of this, I notice a lot of people spamming smoke bombs over the course of playing this game. Yes, they do have to recharge, but they recharge often enough that you can get like 10 of them per match and really use them to your advantage to avoid being the target. It's not cheating or anything like that, but when you combine it together with other abilities, like of course resetting your cooldowns or things like that, it does become very frustrating to enemy players because it actually puts you at an advantage over them. And you're probably thinking, well, Jay, if everybody has the smoke bomb, why is this a problem? And that's the thing, not everybody does. That's kind of actually one of the things that frustrated me about this game, as fun and unique as the multiplayer was that it was level based on what kind of abilities you were going to get. So I believe the smoke bomb was somewhere between level 10 and 12 when you first unlock it, but there are better and buffed versions of abilities later on, such as enhanced disguise or longer disguise, where you can turn into an enemy NPC or a non-hostile NPC, I guess I should say, that isn't you for an extended amount of time, whereas someone who's only level 4 might not be able to do that. And while of course the answer to that is just grind and get your level up, it is a bit frustrating because from a video game design perspective, this does put higher level players at a distinct advantage. They're not only going to be better than you because they've played the game more, they're also going to be better than you because they have access to better abilities. This is something that I think games have tried to somewhat move away from, more, I would say, equalizing the playing field and trying to level it and put people at the same, I guess, ability cap, but then of course your skill is what will make the difference. That's kind of the modern video game mentality when it comes to multiplayer in most games. I'm looking at you, 2K, because of course if you just start pumping VC into characters and stuff like that, you're going to become unstoppable, which is kind of BS. But anyways, I digress. That's kind of what they try and go at nowadays with video game design. It's very obvious that Ubisoft was not very skilled at this sort of game design, and it did, of course, take some hits because of this, with that sort of ability level up system, making it very difficult for certain players. And sadly, it does affect the experience, but also even more sadly, it's a really fun experience that's very unique and is kind of going to go away unless fans find a way to preserve this in an alternative manner, like fan servers, etc. A lot of games are being preserved that way nowadays by fans, so I would not put it past them. They're much more dedicated than the companies ever will be, and I'm hoping that will be the case. This game was also riddled with some bugs. For example, I experienced a bug where because somebody dropped poison, I believe it was a poison cloud, I became invincible but also couldn't hurt anyone. Enemies would auto jump away from me if I tried to attack them. It's not an evasion maneuver, it's nothing the player would do, and I would do the same thing if anyone tried to attack me. Now normally what you want to do if this happens is leave the lobby, but because I sat sometimes waiting 2 to 3 hours just to find a lobby and actually get in to play Brotherhood, Brotherhood. I didn't want to do that, and it did wear off the following match, but it was really annoying because it pretty much was like a motion sickness type effect stuck on the screen for the entire match, and I was invincible and so was everyone else, and nothing could be done for me to actually play the match or participate. There are certainly problems like that in here that definitely do affect the game. What's really frustrating about this game is that despite its issues, it did have a very unique concept, like I said, almost violent hide and seek, that really did make it stand out at the time and still makes it stand out as an Assassin's Creed experience, especially because in a way it's almost like Among Us, except everybody's the imposter and going after each other at the same time. And also it does preserve those climbing mechanics very well. There are also a lot of very, very, very beautiful maps in the multiplayer here that you don't necessarily get to go to in the base game. Some of them you do, but even places like Ezio's Villa, which if you've played Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, pretty much just gets axed at the very beginning of the game. That thing is gone, but it does come back, of course, later on in canon. Regardless, it's something where it's frustrating because these are the only ways to visit some of these areas is to play the Brotherhood multiplayer, and with that going away, so does a lot of explorable and fun content in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Now, if players only have access to the next gen, or I guess I should say last gen now, versions of this game anyway, on Xbox One and PS4, where they had gotten remastered with the Ezio collection, now improved, of course, on the Xbox Series X, they're probably not going to notice that anyway, especially if that's where they started playing, because this was unceremoniously cut out of the release, which now comes off as a bit of a tactical move to just move straight up away from this multiplayer experience. I've seen some people try and predict, or I guess I should say speculate, that there could be some sort of multiplayer component return to Assassin's Creed, like a free-to-play game, etc., as Ubisoft moves more into the multiplayer space, and that could be part of the reason why this was never brought up to modern hardware, and also why it is getting shut down now. However, I don't really know of anything to confirm that. It would be fun to see it happen, but if that's the actual reasoning behind these shutting down, that's pretty scummy, because what would likely happen then is it would be probably a free-to-play or cheap experience that would be monetized, and the reason they'd be moving away from these is because it was more complete. Now, it's not perfect, it does have a lot of blemishes and problems, but I find myself really feeling like I'm going to miss this component of the game. I remember when I was younger, I kind of complained about it. I felt like it was unfair, too hard, and I was definitely impatient about it. And as I got older, it sort of faded from my mind. I really forgot about its existence until recently when the stories came out of it shutting down. Going back to revisit it kind of felt like a wave of nostalgia. And while, of course, whenever you have one of these things, you do view them a little bit with rose-colored glasses and miss some of the flaws, I don't really feel like I'm doing that with this. It's got a lot of problems, but it had so many fun and unique things, from interesting characters to very, very cool and beautiful locales and maps, to, of course, fun abilities and other mechanics that aren't even in the main game other than this. And on top of all of it, it was tied into the lore as an Abstergo training program for new Abstergo recruits and Templars to actually test their mettle and become better in the Animus and be able to take those skills out into the real world. This fit in a lot of ways into the established continuity and canon of Assassin's Creed, and it was a fun experience and a really enjoyable time. I'm interested to see what happens following this game with the other multiplayers. I don't really remember playing them much. I remember trying Revelations back when it first came out, but beyond that, I don't know a ton about them. I do know that they were different versions of this multiplayer, and some people like this one the most, others the least, so I'm interested to see what I think going forward. I will be sure to review those and talk about them retrospectively, so if you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Did you ever play the Assassin's Creed Brotherhood multiplayer? What are your thoughts? What do you think about these games shutting down? Like I said before, I truly think that companies like Ubisoft, Activision, EA, these massive companies, they have enough money to keep these things up forever, and it actually kind of annoys me that they shut them down because it's like droplets of water to them. It's pennies compared to $1 billion to keep these servers up. And also, of course, my wife Jill is starting a very wonderful, beautiful venture where she's going to be working on personalized pet paintings over on Etsy very, very soon. So I urge you to check out Enchanted Glamor on Etsy. The link is in the description down below. Every purchase, whether it be jewelry, paintings, etc., goes to help support the channel and keep the lights on over here. And we do have a Patreon and a lot of other ways to help support us. This channel has been in a very, very odd place. I would say the last 6 months, where we're not really growing very much and people aren't really seeing my videos nearly as often as they used to. Thanks, YouTube. I appreciate that. So kind of getting out of that, it's just up to us all pushing through and coming together, and I appreciate you so, so much for that and the support. Have a fantastic day, and as always, everyone, stay shui.